Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontefract. Today in the house, a couple of platform thinkers. More to come on that, a short bio. Thanks for joining us. In the house today, Daniel Trabucchi is Senior Assistant Professor of Platform Thinking, and Tommaso Buganza is Full Professor of Leadership and Innovation. Both are at the Politec-nico di Milano, and they are scientific directors of the Observatory Platform Thinking Hub and the co-authors of, a book that also is called Platform Thinking, Read the Past, Write the Future, write WRITE. Both were recently also appointed to the Thinkers 50 Radar Class of 2024. I'm so excited. I've burned through your book, gentlemen. Thanks for being here. Let's start with platform thinking generally, and we're going to get into some specifics. So if platform thinking is the ability to put platform-based mechanisms significantly at the core of digital business transformation for any business, I want to first ask you both, well, how do you define platform thinking? And in so really in the context of today's kind of digital economy, all things being digital these days, I want to know what you think about platform thinking in the context of it becoming maybe a platform economy.
Well, this question could probably take the whole session. It's definitely a good start. First of all, hello everyone. Thanks very much for having us here. What is platform thinking and what is the role of platform thinking in a digital economy? I think the best answer, at least from my perspective, then we'll see what Tommaso will say to this answer, is actually starting from the history that brought us here.
Okay.
Tommaso is Professor of Leadership and Innovation, while I actually teach platform thinking, but my roots are as well in innovation management. And 10 years ago, more or less, it started a few years before with this, we started this joint research on platforms, basically falling in love with what was happening between 2012 and 2014. All these digital apps that were taking the market, it was super in love with Zombies Run. We studied Runkeeper, Waze, all those companies that were actually gaining momentum back then. And the common point there was to have a basically free business model. So they were available for free in the vast majority of their services. And we start studying those companies, those apps, to understand how it was possible to have a free service, basically. And the answer came out to be a platform-based business model. From there, we actually started a very long journey in the platform world. We moved to the more famous, from the platform perspective, cases of Airbnb, of Uber, and the usual suspects in this world, let me say. And we stayed on digital startups for years. But our roots are in the innovation management. So we tend to talk with established companies. And that's where platform thinking was born. Basically, the point is, what can we learn from all those apps, startups, digital companies, new models for the established firms? What can we learn from them to let the most traditional world, let me say, actually foster innovation thanks to what they discovered? So this is in a nutshell to us platform thinking, seeing in their mechanisms and ways of creating value, the starting point to learn a new way of actually doing business and fostering innovation.
I think I can build a little bit on this because I started some years before and I come from innovation management as well. And it's strange because I met platforms in my PhD. So we are going, many years back. We are the 90s. Part of it was about product platforms. So how you build, a basic platform and when you can derivative, new products on top of it and so on. And I think that this is fascinating because the word platform, this is one very important thing for us. The word platform per se doesn't really mean anything. So those platforms that I used to study back, at the end of a millennium, are completely different from the platforms we are talking about here. So we use the same word platform, both for the platforms of Volkswagen, so product platform, but also for Uber, Airbnb, or Google, or Meta, and so on. And I think that this thing is probably the most important to me, understanding that the platforms, as normally they are intended to be like product platforms in Volkswagen, are not really changing the way in which you create value. They are making it more efficient. So you got a basic product, it's easier, it's faster, it is cheaper to build new products on top of it, and so it's great. So I got nothing against it. But this is still the old way of doing business. It's a linear one. You buy things, you transform things, you sell things. So the company is open on two different sides. On the one side, you are acquiring competencies, materials, services, you put them together and then you sell. The platforms that we talk about in terms of platform thinking are incredibly different from this approach, because basically they connect different clients. So the company is open not to providers and clients, but to clients and clients.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a change. So part of the operations of the companies are actually made by somebody else. And so think about Airbnb, for example. You are a company, you want to go against Hilton. Well, it's a huge investment before you get to a significant number of rooms to be offered on the market. You need to invest, you need to buy buildings, you need to buy services from architects, and you need to buy the beds, you need to buy the coffee machine and even the coffee pot. So you need to buy everything before you can really offer something to the market. And instead, in this case, you got another client. You got the host who's not your provider, he's a client.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to find a way to satisfy that client, because if you can do that, you will have both clients satisfied. So this idea of having two interacting customers is incredibly fascinating and sophisticated. And so this is probably what brought me to say, okay, this is really new. It's not just a new way of developing products or cars. It's a new way of thinking the business creation and the value creation.
So then, to help us understand, guys, sort of the difference between a traditional business model that people might be used to or is still being taught in MBAs, and then what are those kind of core principles or even like the foundational design principles of a successful platform using kind of your theories then of platform thinking?
Well, I think that the easiest way to answer this question is defining what is not a platform.
Oh, okay.
So just denying somehow this word that Tommaso was saying has so many different meanings. In our book, we actually go through 5 different definitions.
Mm-hmm.
We say that it's not a platform what is based on the linear value chain. Let me say the usual way of doing business. So you've got suppliers, you're actually buying things from your suppliers, which is raw materials or work in progress or whatever it is. You actually take them, you build on top of those materials, you add value on top of it, and you sell it to the market. That's exactly what the restaurant does. They actually buy the raw materials, they cook them, and they actually serve whatever dishes they are going to offer to their customers. That's what car manufacturers actually do, and so on and so forth. This model is coming from, it's by Porter, 1985.
Yeah.
The value. Yeah. And you're right, it's actually what is taught in any business school, in our business school as well. And you know what? That's absolutely fine. The world needs the linear value chain. But for a bunch of decades, the linear value chain was the only model. And then there were exceptions, like the newspapers, or I don't know, the markets, or the airports, or those places that were actually building on business models that were not so linear, but after all, they were just exceptions. So yeah, it's true. On the newspaper, the end user is actually paying for the newspaper, but very little money that cannot support the whole machine, because there is someone else paying for the whole machine. That is the advertiser. But that was not that interesting in a certain way because it was an exception. Now, we do believe that next to the linear value chain, we do have another dominant model that is equally interesting, even though not that studied yet in a certain way, which are platforms let me say, in the broader meaning. We say that platforms share two main characteristics. The first one is having multiple interdependent sets of customers. As I was saying, on Airbnb, the travelers and the host are two customers. On the newspaper, the readers and the advertisers, or on Facebook, the users and the advertisers are two different sets of customers. The second characteristics are the so-called cross-site network externalities, which is basically the secret that lets those businesses actually growing in such a fast and pervasive way over the last decade or 2 decades. It means that the more people are actually joining Airbnb as travelers, the most people will join Airbnb as host because it's more relevant. You know, actually renting my room, it's going to be extremely easier if there are more people willing to actually rent rooms on Airbnb. At the same time, the more people are renting their rooms on Airbnb, the more it's going to be interesting for me to join that platform because I can actually find the room where I want it at the price I like, and so on and so forth. These two elements joined, so the fact of having multiple sets of customers and the cross-site network externalities actually make the platform. But to make it simple, it's everything that it's not linear in the value creation process. The company creates value, the travelers creates value, the host creates value for the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. But if I may end on this, it's so one thing about this is that for quite a long time, Daniel somehow said that before, we gave for granted that there was the way to make business for startups. So your startup, you do not have money, you do not have competencies, you do not have connections, you do not have clients, basically got nothing. And you need to find a way to provide services without spending too much and to grow enough without spending too much. So there's a problem with the marginal cost for serving more clients. And so it makes sense that if you are Airbnb or a startup, you cannot really go against Hilton starting by, buying buildings. So that's impossible. Right. So in a certain way, it makes a lot of sense that many startups started to somehow find this way of, interconnecting different customers in order to grow up without spending too much. So if you're Airbnb and you're offering 1 million of rooms and then you offer 2 million of rooms, the cost is not twice for you. So it's going to be, normally we say zero margin cost, of almost zero. So it's not going to be zero, but it's not the double, definitely. So you can grow faster without, having the cost increasing. So it makes sense that startups go for it. The tipping point for us, it was like 3 years ago, more or less, in which we said, it's okay. So it makes sense that startups want to use a platform-based approch. But is the opposite true as well? So established firms that cannot use why? So in a certain way, there's no sense. I mean, it's just not happening. But it doesn't mean that it cannot happen. And so we started working with companies and looking for companies doing it. Actually, we found quite a good number of established companies that started to investigate, do some, experiments in order to use a platform-based approach, even though they were not startups. And that was such an eye-opening moment to us. So it's platform thinking. It's not a startup thing. It's a way of doing business. It can also be used by established companies. And our research started to be focused on that. How companies, established companies, industrial companies, pharmaceutical companies, car manufacturers, aircraft manufacturers, how they can use the platform thinking. And this is, the field, the part of the research in which we are having the most incredible results so far.
Well, it's a wonderful segue, because when I got through the book and I was looking back at some of the examples up front, you sort of explain a really good dichotomy between Microsoft and Apple, where originally kind of the business model was that Windows/Microsoft was an open platform, whereas Apple came in it as a closed platform. But if you fast forward several years, when, the infamous well, maybe not infamous, but the famous, January 7th, 1997, Steve Jobs, here's the iPhone, that sort of gave birth to different platform thinking for Apple. So the iPhone, of course, is a product platform, as you point out. iOS is what you call an innovative platform. And of course, the App Store is a transactional platform. And so you call Apple now a hybrid platform. So it sounds like their original business model was closed, and they evolved their thinking to introduce themselves to be a hybrid platform. So I want you to unpack that in your point to both of you, and particularly Tommaso, what you pointed out there is that you really are suggesting that, Apple is a case study, I suppose, but that many existing business models can be thinking platform related.
Yeah, this is exactly our point. And I think that probably you took, so there are two super great examples. So one is Apple, because you're right. So if we consider different typologies of platforms, which means, each platform is a way of doing business, but then the company can be very complex.
Mm-hmm.
So which means that basically to say that company is a platform is a huge mistake. And it took us some years to understand it. So the company itself is not a platform or a not platform. The single service, the single product, that is a platform or not a platform, which means that in the same, of course, when you look at startups, they only do one thing. So you look at Uber, so it's a platform. It's a single product company, basically at the beginning it was. And that product was a platform. So typically we started to identify the platform with the company.
Mm-hmm.
But when we started analyzing more complex companies like Apple, we understood that some things are actually platforms of one kind. Some other things can be managed with a platform of another kind. Some other things with a platform of another kind. Or if we go to the platform master, so the company that according to us is mastering the platform thinking in the most incredible way, Amazon. Amazon, with no problem, is putting together something that is absolutely platform-based, so the marketplace, with something that is absolutely not platform-based, a linear business, AWS. So Amazon Web Services is not a platform. They only have got this single client at the end. They've got this incredible digital product. They sell a digital product, digital services to the market. So they are able to develop in the same company at the same time something in a platform way and some other things not in a platform way. So there space for potentially for every company in the world doing anything for a platform-based approach? Surely. But doesn't mean that you will start doing airplanes, running the business as Uber. No, it's not going to happen. You still have to buy stuff, to assemble stuff, to engineering stuff. So there are things that you cannot really manage with a platform approach. But there are many other things that you can do. If you take, for example, the case of John Deere, they still produce tractors. They still buy components, materials, and so on. But they also built an incredible platform on top of it, in which they are connecting, providers with farmers and so on in a very, very clever way. So is there space for every company on platform? Probably yes. Maybe not for the business that they are doing now. There might be other business lines that they want to open.
And it actually then now additionally segues to a concept that you introduced me to in the book from the perspective of platform thinking, and that's absorptive capacity. And for people that don't know absorptive capacity, Cohen and Leventhal, in 1990-ish, right, basically said it's the ability to recognize kind of new information and apply it to a business setting or commercial means. And so how does absorptive capacity and the lens of absorptive capacity relate now to people in their business modeling?
Well, let's say that we took one of the most important theories or lenses in the innovation management academic debate, and we actually use it to frame the whole book we've been writing. The subtitle you were mentioning at the beginning, Read the Present, Write the Future, I think is the best metaphor for this usage of the absorptive capacity in our book. The absorptive capacity, said in very little words, means that when you have a new technology, you need to develop the skill to actually assess it, understand it, make it your own in a certain way so that you can actually exploit the opportunities related to that within your firm. And usually it was actually studied talking about new technologies. We believe that for platforms, even though it's not correct to consider them a technology, but merely a business model, it's basically the same. The fact that this word has been so overused over the last 15 years, calling everything a platform. Every service is a platform. A few days ago, we were actually in an event in which someone was saying, "Oh yeah, I know perfectly what are platforms. Everything based on a subscription." No, not really. No, not really. So there are in the minds of people, there are so many different things popping up when you say platform. Probably many of them are correct, but since there are so many different perspectives and sometimes also some wrong conception about platform, actually conceiving the value there, it's basically impossible. So we divided the book into two parts. The first part is read the past. Let's look back. Let's look at the Microsoft history versus Apple. Let's look at the Airbnb model. How does it really work? How did it evolve in the last 10 years? Uber, Facebook, Google. Let's take all those great names, Waze, and try to understand what they actually did. Let's try to develop, we often use in the slides a picture with the glasses. Let's actually develop the right glasses to read how and why they are different from the linear value chain business models, from the normal companies, from the usual companies. That is the actual absorptive capacity. So let's find a way to actually assess why these things are so interesting, but also different from what we've been taught. We do believe that we live in a linear value chain mindset that has been taught by the management discipline at large, because everything was actually focusing on those businesses, and that's absolutely fine. But now we cannot use those theories to read these new models. Once we are able to actually assess the differences, so to actually see that Amazon and Google and Facebook and Apple ends up in the same list of platform companies or big techs or whatever we want to call them, they actually rely on very different platform models or value creation mechanisms on the various initiatives. Once we are there, we absorbed enough the platform word that we can start writing it, so we can exploit it. And Tommaso was making a very good point. Fostering platform thinking in a company doesn't mean that that company will stop working on the linear value chain and will move in the platform world. It means that it will be able also to foster innovation through platforms. It can be one initiative, one project. It can be 200. That's not the point. But in this moment, you can speak two languages. You can speak the language of the linear value chain models, and you speak the language of platforms. And sometimes the platforms actually open up opportunities that otherwise you couldn't get. A very short example, CVS during the pandemic, they actually open a digital platform to support their own customers, basically, in getting in touch with physicians, mainly with psychologists, to get mental health support considering what we were going through. And you can literally do that. Overnight probably is exaggerated, but opening up a platform beside the technological part can be super easy if you are a big brand, if you can already, I cannot say assure, but rely on a gigantic customer base. You can easily attract the second side. And at that point, you're up and ready with your platform and with your new service. You could do the same thing in the linear value chain. But you know, the recruitment process, the actually flow to get to a similar solution would be completely different. And the scalability would be different, and the implications would be different, and so on and so forth. It's a new tool that we can use to foster innovation, whoever we are.
Well, I think you also point out in the book that whilst it can be used for existing business modeling like a CVS and use it in different ways, absorptive capacity is also potentially for net new startup thinking as well. So the example you provide in the book was the story with Fred Mazzella and Blah Blah Car. And so there in my head, I'm thinking, okay, so here's this gentleman who's having a personal challenge, kind of finding his way home for the Christmas season. And sort of any of the traditional services from a transportation perspective were booked or overbooked. And so he came to this realization, if I get this right, that kind of like car inefficiency or car usage inefficiency led to this absorptive capacity opportunity for Mazzella to found Blah Blah Car. So maybe take the story from there and help unpack for listeners and viewers how that relates to platform thinking.
Well, that story is very interesting. We got the chance to talk with Frederic Mazzella back in Paris in 2018, I guess it was.
Mm-hmm.
And that story is extremely interesting. I think it looks back at the more, let me say, traditional way of perceiving platforms, so actually setting up a platform. The interesting thing that we learn looking at that story is another concept, that is the concept of idle asset. You were pointing out to the space in the cars. And I think that we can easily picture him staying in a car with his sister, if I remember correctly, heading back home, with the train that was going by fully booked, and with probably a lot of more people that would have loved to be exactly on the same train.
Right.
And then while you are in the highway looking around you and seeing so many empty places, that's the best way to picture for ourselves the idea of idle asset. What if we set up a system, we will call it a platform, that can actually help people that would need that space to actually find it? That's the same idea of Airbnb. That's the same idea of Uber. And as Tommaso was saying, probably startups, thanks to digital technologies, even though platforms were created before the digital revolution, but thanks to digital technologies, the chance to actually rely on the idle resources that are spread in the market became more evident. Now, our bet is those idle resources are definitely in our houses, are definitely sitting in the market somewhere in the places of private citizens, but are sitting also within firms. Also established firms or also platforms actually have those idle assets that can trigger other platform initiatives. The best example there is probably Uber creating Uber Eats. Once you have the first one done, the others can follow in an extremely easier way, which doesn't mean that that's easy, but that's definitely easier in comparison to the first one.
That's beautiful.
There's one thing that, if I may, I would like to add, because among the many misconceptions that there are around the world about the term platform is that this is typically a digital thing, it's a technological thing, and so on. And actually, I do think that there is a very strong connection between the digital revolution and the platforms, which doesn't mean that they are the same thing. So one thing that I think it's incredibly important to say is that when we talk about platforms, we talk about a mechanism to create value. The mechanism does not require per se the existence of technology. So in our book, what we do explain is that all the different typologies of platforms actually are leveraging a mechanism that was invented centuries ago, in some cases thousands of years ago. So if you look at Amazon, it's a marketplace. The marketplace is market, and the first market was in Persia, 3,000 years before Christ. And so for all the typologies, it's incredible to see that they do not need digital technologies, but they were invented before. The mechanism is already there. On the other side, digital technologies are, making the system very efficient, very smart, very scalable, very cost efficient, and so on. So, in a certain way, digital technologies are enablers of something, but they are not creating it. It was already existing. On the other side, if we look at the cases that Daniel was naming, Uber, Airbnb, and BlaBlaCar, just to name the first three, I think that one interesting thing is that all of them started with people having problems. So the founder of BlaBlaCar wanting to go, by train and not finding a place. The founder of Uber was looking for a taxi, couldn't find a taxi, had to take a private one. It was incredibly expensive, and same for Airbnb. Which brings us to say that the most difficult, probably one of the most difficult things that companies, could be startups or established firms, they need to do is to craft the perfect service for more than one client. And so having two interdependent clients means that you need to develop two services, and both of them need to work. And we know that it's very difficult to launch a new service and to succeed in a market. Now you need to do it twice. You need to be able to win with both of them, because if one is working, the other one is not, the system is not working. And I think that putting the humans at the center of the analysis, what are you promising to people? Having this sort of design thinking approach, having the ability to really imagine the customer journey. So these things seems to turn even more important than dominating the technology. You will find the right technology once you've got a very clear idea of what you're doing and why you are doing it. So technology seems to come last.
Well, you've now segued to my final two-part question so well, and I owe you, I guess, a beer, Tommaso. So there is two things going on in my mind, I think, that possibly are required. First, I'll call it education, and the second is mindset. So two-part question. So from an education kind of future skills perspective, what do universities or even training departments and organizations need to be thinking about to sort of unleash and unlock platform thinking? And then the second is the mindset shift necessary for traditional companies to get up out of their foxholes or their ditches or their trenches, wherever they're hiding, and sort of get them to successfully transition, or at least think about platform thinking and platform mindsets?
Well, to me, the two questions are quite linked. So I'm kind of answering to both, and then we'll see what Tommaso think about it. I think the answer to your question goes back to innovation. If you move away platform thinking and you put innovation there, the answer would be probably the same. We live in a world that it's going faster and faster. There are proofs that this sentence has always been said, but still, technology is actually knocking at our doors, new trends, new, potentially disruptive mechanisms and things like that. I strongly believe that people, being them students or professionals, still lack the proper understanding of the revolution that already happened. So we are still lacking the proper understanding of what happened between 2007, probably with the launch of iPhone, till the COVID pandemic. These models has literally entered in our daily life from the front door in any aspect of our life. We listen to music through platforms. We watch TV through platforms. Many people actually find their girlfriend and boyfriend through platforms. They are everywhere. But still, as professionals, we are not understanding them. So I do believe that both from an educational perspective and from a professional perspective, finding a way to understand this second language is absolutely needed. Again, it's not a new language that will overscribe the first one. We need both, but we need to understand that they are different and that they are coexisting. I must say, we said that business schools are teaching everything based on the linear value chain. We both work in a business school. I'm directing an MBA. I can tell you that it's true, but that all the business schools are also looking at the other model. So it's happening. It's happening. But what is missing, in my opinion, is the awareness on the pervasiveness of this model in the company culture, in the management culture. So it still stands out as okay, there are these technological trends, these companies that did great things, but that's for techie companies, for startups, and that's it. I believe we need awareness on what already happened to capitalize it for what is going on right now. AI, metaverse, all those technologies are actually very coherent with the platform revolution. So actually learning from what just happened could be important.
Yeah, I mean, I will make a point on the mindset. Actually, you're touching one of my favorite topics ever. So, because I mean, I'm professional leadership innovation, so I come from organizational studies too. So one interesting thing to me is that when you really want to change the skin of your company, you're not just introducing a new product, a new service. You want to change the roots, how we make business and how we create value. The first people you need to convince, it's your own. So you need to, they need to feel, we need to feel as members of an organization that we do something different. And I think that this is one crucial point about platform thinking, because many people within the company need completely changing the mindset they've got. Let me give you a very simple example. In a linear value chain, we are accustomed to have a customer and we're accustomed to have providers. And we have got people trained, very well trained, to deal with providers. So how you deal with a provider? You give the requirements, you negotiate the price, and the service level agreements, and all of these kind of things. You are buying. I am buying from you, so I am your customer. When you start building a platform, you've got customers on both sides. So all of a sudden, somebody was already accustomed to work with customers because we are still selling something to them. Now somebody else needs to stop thinking that they are buying from a provider. They are selling to a customer another service that is needed to serve the other one. So let me give you a couple of examples. If you think about Booking.com, it's easy to imagine the kind of services that Booking needs to develop for us, for travelers. But on the other side, they need to carefully study the hotels. Hotels are a customer. They can decide to go on Booking. They can leave Booking tomorrow. What are you offering me? How are you solving my problem? What kind of understanding you've got about my problem? It's not giving me requirements. No. It's understanding what are my needs and how to fulfill my needs and make me a happy customer. So Booking developed a tool to be provided to the hotels in order to electronically and digitally manage the whole, reservation system, which they didn't have in many cases. OpenTable did the same. They created a software that is solving a very specific. The software itself would be enough. Would make them already happy. It's already solving the problem. On top of it, you are also bringing me clients. So you're an angel to me. So you're doing an incredible job. You are treating me as a customer. This is probably the most difficult thing. I was I would never disclose the name, but I was in a workshop today and with a company, and we are doing this. And at a certain point, there were this bunch of managers and said, so we need to consider them as customers. Yes, that's the point. So there are so many things that we can do for them, and we never did because we didn't want to give them too much. No, so you need to completely revert the way in which, if not everybody in the company, but somebody has got to completely change the mindset. You are offering services to multiple clients. This is a big revolution. It's a wonderful one when you see it in the eyes of people. When at a certain point they click, and when they click, they start very fast. At that point, it's clear. You're my customer. There are so many things I can do for you. Let me help you. So this is completely, a wonderful moment. Believe me, you would like to see it happening in the eyes of people.
Oh, believe you me, I am on the mindset train of platform thinking. Gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. Daniel Trabucchi and, of course, Tommaso Buganza. Where can we find out more about you and platform thinking?
Well, for sure, our LinkedIn profiles, we are quite active, so feel free to reach out to others and to let us know if you have any comments, questions, or whatsoever. And then platformthinking.eu is the website where you can find everything we've done on platforms, from the MOOC, from the book to the MOOCs on Coursera, the podcast talking about platforms, and all the various activities we are running.
Yeah, those MOOCs, when I was doing some research on you both, I'm like, geez, you really are nailing it when it comes to opening up the education mindset and ultimately swaying people in terms of thinking that mindset. So Tommaso and Daniel, thank you so much. Really learned a lot. The book is fantastic. Platform Thinking, read the past, write the future. Two scholarly gentlemen making platform thinking simple for us people out there to understand how it can become, guys, the business model. Maybe not just the new one, but the business model. That's another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontefract. Again, thank you, Daniel and Tommaso. We'll see you around next time for another episode.